The Crown of the Cosmic Temple, Recovering the Ontological Identity and Vocation of the Imago Dei. For centuries, Christian theology has engaged with the declaration of Genesis 1:27 that humanity, male and female, was created in the image of God. Western interpreters, influenced by post-biblical philosophical frameworks, have often abstracted the Imago Dei from its ancient Near Eastern context and situated it in structural capacities such as intellect, memory, or free will. In response to these tendencies, this study integrates three methodological approaches. First, I employ a canonical biblical theological framework, prioritizing the final form of the scriptural canon and tracing themes through their organic development across the promise plan of God. Second, I engage historical critical analysis, situating the text within its literary and cultural contexts while recognizing the historical development of theological interpretation. Third, I incorporate comparative ancient Near Eastern studies to illuminate the cognitive environment shared by Israel and its neighbors, particularly in matters of temple symbolism and royal imagery. By combining these approaches, the analysis seeks to recover the Imago Dei's original meaning and ongoing significance within the cosmic temple motif. When the text is examined through this rigorous, multidimensional methodology, with attention to the final form of the canon, the Hebraic cognitive environment, and the organic unity of the promise plan, an alternative paradigm emerges. The Imago Dei is not a functional capacity possessed by humans or an action performed. Rather, it constitutes the fundamental ontological identity of every human being as the physical, earthly representative of Yahweh's presence within the sacred space of the cosmic temple. This identity underpins the royal vocation to mediate divine rule and, through the progressive promise plan, extends from creation to new creation without being lost in the fall or transferred from ethnic Israel. The influence of Greek philosophy, which led to capacity-based anthropologies, is extensively documented. As the gospel entered the Greco-Roman world, early Christian thinkers increasingly adopted Platonic dualism and Aristotelian analytical categories to articulate theological concepts. Augustine primarily located the image in the rational soul's faculties of memory, understanding, and will, while Thomas Aquinas further distinguished between the image, natural endowments, and likeness, supernatural grace. Although some patristic figures, notably Irenaeus of Lyons, advanced a more holistic and Christ-centered understanding through the motif of recapitulation, the prevailing Western tradition emphasized capacity-based interpretations. These developments provided a means to distinguish humans from animals, but introduced linear, non-contradictory logic and a material-spiritual dualism that was foreign to the biblical authors. The ethical implications are significant. If the image is defined by exercisable capacities, individuals whose capacities are diminished by age, disability, or injury are perceived as possessing less of the divine image. This perspective evaluates human worth by utility rather than by divine decree. Thanks for reading. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work. Biblical authors did not approach their work as Greek philosophers. They operated within a cognitive environment that allowed for the juxtaposition of complementary truths without requiring immediate philosophical synthesis. Although linguistic scholarship has cautioned against oversimplified dichotomies between Hebrew and Greek thought, the heuristic value of Hebraic block logic remains significant when appropriately qualified. Recent studies, however, complicate this contrast by highlighting points of convergence as well as difference. Scholars such as Mark S. Smith and John J. Collins have argued that ancient Israelite thought was not entirely immune to Hellenistic influence, and that even within the Hebrew Bible itself, diverse ways of conceptualizing identity and existence can be found. Yet while the strict binary between Hebraic and Greek reasoning has been critiqued, the basic contours of a more concrete, status-based anthropology in the biblical texts are widely recognized. In this context, existence and identity were defined less by internal psychological attributes and more by divinely assigned status and function within an ordered cosmos. Consequently, the phrase image of God functions as a noun of identity. Humanity is the image by virtue of creation. This textual assertion fundamentally safeguards human dignity. To recover the meaning of tselem in the text, it is necessary to engage with the cognitive world of the ancient Near East. In this context, the term referred to a physical statue or idol placed within a temple. Through rituals such as the Mesopotamian opening of the mouth ceremony, the idol became the localized manifestation of the deity's presence and authority. John H. Walton has demonstrated that Genesis 1 should be understood not as a narrative of material manufacturing, but as an account of functional origins, specifically the inauguration of a cosmic temple. Over 6 days, God separates, names, and assigns functions: time, day 1, weather, day 2, and food in the forming phase, luminaries, birds and fish, land animals, and humanity in the filling phase. The repeated declaration that creation is good, or ki tob, indicates functional readiness. The 7th day, when God rests, or Shabbat, marks the climax. In the ancient world, divine rest occurs in a temple upon a throne, signifying active residence and sovereign rule. Yahweh prohibits carved idols, Exodus 24, because living images, human beings, have already been installed within the cosmic temple. Humanity is the tselem, the physical means by which the invisible Creator manifests presence and extends rule on earth. Alternative scholarly readings have also contributed to the discussion. Some interpreters focus on relational or functional aspects, suggesting that the image consists in human ability to relate to God and other creatures, or to exercise dominion over creation. Others, such as Klaus Westermann and Gordon J. Wenham, emphasize the significance of human authority rather than temple imagery, contending that image can broadly refer to appointed stewardship without invoking a cosmic temple context. Further, scholars like Samuel Terrian argue that Salem in Genesis denotes chiefly human resemblance to God in terms of spirituality or morality, emphasizing less the physical or cultic dimensions. These approaches highlight the complexity of the concept and its interpretation across different scholarly traditions. By bringing these views into conversation, the present analysis underlines the strengths of the temple motif, while acknowledging that the meaning of Salem remains a subject of dynamic academic debate. This royal vocation is further clarified by the plural pronouns in Genesis 1:26. Let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness. Within the Hebraic cognitive environment, these plurals refer to the divine council, the heavenly assembly of spirit beings over which Yahweh presides. Psalm 82:1, 1 Kings 22:19, Job 1-2. God announces this intention to the celestial host, declaring the creation of an earthly counterpart to their representative status. The immediate shift to singular verbs in verse 27 affirms that Yahweh alone is creator.
While some canonical interpreters, considering the New Testament's revelation of the triune God, discern in the plural an anticipatory indication of intra-divine relationality, the immediate historical grammatical context and broader ancient Near Eastern and Israelite divine council traditions strongly support interpreting the plural as an address to the heavenly host. Nevertheless, it is important to recognize that classical Trinitarian theology has often referenced Genesis 1:26 to affirm the plurality within God, and to see in these pronouns a subtle foreshadowing of the doctrine of the Trinity. My reading does not reject the legitimacy of seeing the fuller revelation of the Trinity developed canonically, but it emphasizes that for the original audience, the plurality would have been understood primarily in reference to the divine counsel. The historic Christian tradition's Trinitarian interpretation can thus be seen as a canonical extension or theological reading, layered upon but not replacing the immediate literary and cultural context. The creation of humanity thus establishes a symbiotic relationship between heaven and earth. The loyal Elohim serve in the heavenly court, and humans serve as co-regents in the earthly temple.
This shared representative status is further transformed by the text's democratization of royal identity. In Egyptian and Mesopotamian ideology, the status of image of God was typically reserved for the reigning monarch. The biblical text, however, extends this status to every human being, regardless of class, capacity, or social standing. J. Richard Middleton describes this as a liberating image that collectively assigns humanity the mandate to rule and subdue. This democratization also encompasses gender. The literary symmetry of Genesis 1:27, "In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them," confirms that the ontological status of being God's image applies equally to both sexes. While procreation is necessary for fulfilling the mandate to be fruitful, it cannot serve as the basis of the image, since animals receive a similar reproductive command, Genesis 1:22. Male and female together reflect the divine presence and exercise representative authority within the cosmic temple. The universal creational identity must be connected to the particular election of Israel without disrupting their organic relationship. Every human being retains the image of God. This ontological status is irrevocable, even in the context of rebellion. However, the fall, Genesis 3, the supernatural rebellion of the Watchers, Genesis 6, and the division of the nations at Babel, Genesis 11, verses 9, fractured the vocational mandate and introduced disorder into the cosmic temple. In response, God initiated the Promise Plan, as outlined by Walter C. Kaiser, Jr. This plan unfolds organically from the proto-evangelium of Genesis 3:15 through the Abrahamic covenant with its promise of blessing to all nations, the Davidic covenant's royal lineage, the prophetic vision of the suffering servant in Isaiah, and culminates in the Messiah who restores and expands the creational mandate. Rather than abandoning his earthly images, Yahweh called Abraham and elected Israel to serve as a kingdom of priests, Exodus 19:6. At Sinai, Israel was charged to bear the name faithfully, functioning as Yahweh's restorative representatives to the disinherited nations. Israel's election is not a departure from the creational mandate, but the redemptive mechanism through which the Creator intends to restore the fractured Imago Dei globally. The Promise Plan thus preserves both the universality of human identity and the concrete, future-oriented particularity of Israel's role. Rather than abandoning his earthly images, Yahweh called Abraham and elected Israel to serve as a kingdom of priests, Exodus 19:6. At Sinai, Israel was charged to bear the name faithfully, functioning as Yahweh's restorative representatives to the disinherited nations. Israel's election is not a departure from the creational mandate, but the redemptive mechanism through which the Creator intends to restore the fractured Imago Dei globally. The promise plan thus preserves both the universality of human identity and the concrete, future-oriented particularity of Israel's role. The climactic fulfillment is realized in the person of Jesus the Messiah. Although the phrase image of God is relatively rare in the Hebrew Bible, it appears frequently in the apostolic scriptures in reference to Christ. Paul asserts that the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, Colossians 1:15, and Hebrews affirms that he is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, Hebrews 1:3. Jesus succeeds where the first Adam failed, perfectly embodying both dimensions of the human vocation. He is the true Selem manifesting Yahweh's presence and the faithful Israelite bearing the divine name. Through his obedient life, ministry of reclaiming territory from rebellious spiritual powers, and sacrificial death, Jesus cleanses the cosmic temple. The resurrection affirms physical embodiment and demonstrates the endurance of the original creational project. Believers are currently being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another, 2 Corinthians 3:18. This transformation occurs through union with the perfect image and does not replace Israel. Instead, Gentile believers are grafted into the nourishing root of the commonwealth of Israel, Romans 11:17, Ephesians 2:22. Together, Jewish and Gentile believers form one new humanity, the living temple empowered by the Spirit to resume the original vocation. This anthropology profoundly shapes the Church's identity and mission. As the restored image-bearing community, the Church is called to manifest God's presence in the world by embodying Christ-like character, honoring the inherent dignity of every person, and participating in God's work of reconciliation. The Church's worship, communal life, and acts of justice and care flow from this identity, positioning the people of God as a visible sign of the renewed creation and as God's representatives tasked with extending the blessing and rule of the Creator to every nation. The teleological goal is depicted in Revelation 21:22, where John envisions the New Jerusalem descending to a renewed physical earth. There is no physical temple structure, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb. Revelation 21:22. The entire cosmos becomes the Holy of Holies. The sea of chaos is eliminated. The tree of life is restored for the healing of the nations. In this restored cosmic temple, glorified humanity fulfills the mandate of Genesis 1:26-28, reigning alongside the Messiah in union with the loyal heavenly council. This renewed vision calls the Church to embrace a theological anthropology that grounds human dignity in divine decree rather than utility, directs mission toward the restoration of sacred space, and anticipates the day when the entire cosmos functions as the Holy of Holies. To comprehend what it means to be human, the Church must move beyond anachronistic Western philosophical abstractions and return to the ancient Hebraic roots of the Scriptures. The Imago Dei is the unchangeable ontological identity of every human being, male and female equally, endowed by the Creator to manifest divine presence and exercise rule within the cosmic temple. Tracing this identity through the promise plan from Eden to the New Jerusalem reveals the organic unity of Scripture. The invitation is not merely to study this identity, but to inhabit it, honoring the absolute dignity of every person and faithfully steward in creation until the glory of the Lord fills the earth as the waters cover the sea.